How's it going, everyone? We need to talk about Star Wars Outlaws and the commercial numbers that have come out for the game, and maybe to some of you guys the number looks impressive because on paper I can see how people would think that selling 1 million copies in a month would be rather impressive. If you multiply 1 million by, let's say, $70, and it would be more than $70 spent per copy of the game because Ubisoft releases $130 Ultimate Editions, but let's just say an average of $70. That's a $70 million revenue, and it's well over that given, again, the Ultimate Edition, the Gold Edition, all that stuff. But 1 million copies, I am here to tell you guys, is a colossal, is an outstanding, is a, I don't even know the superlative to attach to it, to exemplify how big of a failure Star Wars Outlaws is from a commercial standpoint. I have my opinions on the game. Ubisoft sent me a copy of the game pre-release. I played through it. I had a lot of issues with it. Was it okay? In aspects, yes, but overall, I would say it's an incredibly mediocre game, and these days, a $70 game being just mediocre, that is really not going to fly. Now, to give you guys a little bit of perspective on Star Wars Outlaws sales numbers, Final Fantasy XVI, which yes, was the latest release in a long-running IP, but Star Wars is a megaton of an IP, and those licensing fees don't come cheap, brothers. As we've seen in the past via leaked documents, licensing fees for these major licensing deals, brothers, they do not come cheap whatsoever. However, Final Fantasy XVI came out last year. It was a platform exclusive on PlayStation 5, wasn't released on Xbox, wasn't released on PC right away. That game sold 3 million copies within a week. 3 million copies within a week. And Square Enix is insane sometimes, I feel like, for their expectations in games. And that game, to Square Enix's standards, was deemed a disappointment. A single platform release only on PlayStation, not on PC or Xbox at launch. And that game, 3 million copies in a week, was deemed a disappointment. Star Wars Outlaws, using a megaton IP, the first Star Wars open world game as Ubisoft promoted it. The first Star Wars open world game on PlayStation 5, it was on Xbox Series, and it was on PC. Probably shot yourself a little bit in the foot there with its PC release being only on Ubisoft Connect. I'm sure some people played it through the Ubisoft Connect subscription service. However, I do believe they shot themselves in the foot a little bit with limiting it to just Steam. However, even with all of that context, 1 million copies in the span of a month is an outstanding, is a colossal, is a megaton of a failure. It is something that really needs to be looked at, and clearly Ubisoft has looked at that. You can say everything I've been saying in videos for the last few years. What really made Ubisoft take a hard look in the mirror is the colossal failure that Star Wars Outlaws was. That is it. That is the main reason why Assassin's Creed Shadows is being delayed, even though developers have been calling for a delay on Assassin's Creed Shadows for months and months. What actually made higher-ups at Ubisoft take a good look in the mirror and see the trajectory of their company? It is the sales numbers of Star Wars Outlaws. Look, Star Wars Outlaws is coming to Steam in just 2 months. Ubisoft is now shifting back to releasing all their games on Steam. It is GG for their plan to really pop off with Ubisoft Connect. And as we've seen, that is a massive area where a lot of publishers are frothing at the mouth to really capitalize that on the PC market, especially, really only the PC market, where you can create your own storefront, you can collect all the revenue, you think you got these major games, you think you're cooking up a good subscription service. I've said over and over again, I think this is a disaster waiting to happen. If EA couldn't do it, if Activision couldn't do it with Call of freaking Duty, if Bethesda couldn't do it, if so many publishers couldn't do it, you think Star Wars Outlaws, you think Assassin's Creed Mirage is gonna help you do it? It wasn't. It was only a matter of time before they got checked. And this is where, when you push back on the consumer a little bit too hard, it might not be an instance where you face repercussions right away. It built and built and built and built. You know what was interesting to me is Star Wars Outlaws, that game's special edition, that game's ultimate edition got a lot of pushback, and it became a real-world story in the gaming news cycle. Guys, your boy's been talking about this for quite a while. Go back to the release of Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. I know nobody gave a damn about that game, but look at that game's price structure, and it was the same thing as Star Wars Outlaws, and they were trying to monetize their games to a higher level. It's obvious to see what Ubisoft is doing, and I can see from an executive standpoint that views things in a vacuum and they just care about the return on the investment of a game. They don't care about video games, they just care about the return on the investment. I can totally see why they're going the gold edition route. I can totally see fake early access. I can totally see the abundance of in-game microtransactions, day one story-based DLC, etc., etc. From a higher level, that is what they're gonna do. They don't give a damn about video games. Me telling you and saying stuff like, oh my god, Ubisoft, you're destroying the goodwill of the consumer, please don't do this. They don't give a damn about me. You think they're sitting at my video and watching my videos, but that is what has been happening for years and years and years. And every time a game came out and Ubisoft got away with it a little bit, they were just going to ramp it up even more, and they were going to get away from what really brought them to the dance. Look, there was a time where Ubisoft was revered as a publisher. I know to a lot of you guys that might seem like something that is unimaginable, that just cannot exist, but go back to the late 2000s, early 2010s when Assassin's Creed was, to me, at its peak. I get it, the games these days sell really well, but I feel like back then yearly Assassin's Creed games, and people didn't even care the fact that it was yearly release. I think at some point we got a little bit, you know, like, alright brother, take a little bit of a break from this, but those games were great. Splinter Cell being at its peak. Remember the lead up to the release of Watch Dogs? I know the perception around Watch Dogs is what it is. However, the lead up to that game was a gargantuan release. And I would say the anticipation and hype leading up to Watch Dogs, a brand new IP done by Ubisoft, was orders of magnitude higher than Star Wars Outlaws, which again, promoted as the first ever Star Wars open world game. And I get it that people have their opinions on Star Wars. However, the Jedi games have been crushing it, even if you have your opinions on the Star Wars movies. And again, I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, so I'm not here to talk to you about that, but the Jedi games have been crushing it. Outlaws should have been something that was a success. However, and again, first open world Star Wars game, and I think without the Star Wars IP, if this game was just a new IP with a different coat of paint on it, it would have been a disaster because the game is incredibly mediocre from my vantage point, and that's a subjective opinion. I know a lot of people did really enjoy it, and if you did, more power to you, but it is a clear indicator of the state of Ubisoft. 1 million sounds like a flashy number. It sounds impressive, but when you contextualize it, add that it's the Star Wars IP that they are utilizing, which is just as big as Marvel. Look at the sales numbers of Marvel's Spider-Man 2, which was a PlayStation 5 exclusive, and hell, look at releases of niche Japanese games. I would say relatively niche, maybe niche isn't the right word. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth cracked 1 million copies sold in like a week. Persona 3 Reload cracked 1 million copies sold in a week, and those aren't games that are piggybacking off the Star Wars IP. That is a huge thing to assess in terms of the status of not Star Wars as a brand. I don't think that it's really Star Wars' fault because I look at Jedi and those games are doing great. If the KOTOR remake comes out in this lifetime, you telling me that's not gonna do really well? It's gonna do exceedingly well if they do, you know, a decent job with it. I do think it's more of an indictment on where Ubisoft is as a publisher, and that's why they are at least course correcting to an extent. They are doing things to try to rebuild that goodwill. Is it possible to rebuild the goodwill? Absolutely. Gaming to me is a very what have you done for me lately kind of industry. Now, Ubisoft has been crapping all over their goodwill for years and years and years, so comparatively to them as this big publisher that has been doing so many anti-consumer practices, it's gonna take a little bit more time for them to rebuild that goodwill than, let's say, a BioWare, where BioWare has put out 2 bad games, but they have that lineage of being one of the elite developers of the world, and they're just a game developer. They're not a megaton publisher or anything like that. If Veilguard comes out and it's unanimously praised, I'm telling you guys, the narrative is gonna shift with BioWare, and people are gonna be like, oh my god, BioWare is back. You know, I'm still very skeptical of that happening, but I'm just saying if Veilguard does turn out well. With Ubisoft, I do think it's gonna take a few high-quality releases. It's gotta start with Assassin's Creed Shadows, and there's only so much refinement you can do in the span of 3 months. No, they're not gonna take out Yasuke. That's like the most ridiculous thought process ever. They aren't gonna limit his role. Like, well, what are we talking about here? But let's fine-tune Shadows. Make sure it's a polished game for release, and then it's gonna take a long time for them to course correct as a whole publisher. games have been in development for a long time, and it's not like, you know, they're just gonna throw away everything and all of a sudden every game from here on out is gonna be Ubisoft at their apex, but it could be a gradual change, and hopefully they'll get to that trajectory. Let's bring back Splinter Cell. You got Rayman in your back pocket. You got so many IPs in your back pocket. Maybe in this lifetime Beyond Good and Evil 2 will come out. I don't know, but that'll do it for me. Again, absolute colossal failure. I cannot exemplify it enough. 1 million looks like a flashy number. This is a gargantuan failure if you really have the context around it. That's gonna do it for me. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Sound off there. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.